Right now, like at petrol stations all across the tropics, there are these plants just completely exploding into bright red
Oh,
flowers.
yeah, they are everywhere.
But the wild thing is, they aren't blooming because the weather is perfect.
No, not at all.
Right, they are blooming because they basically think they are about to die.
It's a total panic response, yeah.
Welcome to today's deep dive. So today we are exploring this single, just wildly fascinating entry from a really vast online journal. It's called qianmeng.org. And our mission for you today is to start by uncovering the surprising botanical science behind this sudden explosion of tropical flowers.
Right.
And then we're going to use that specific biological event as a window into the mind of the author.
Which is a very unique mind.
Totally. He's this really prolific, self-described software plumber who approaches nature, his hobbies, and pretty much his entire life with this systematic hacker mindset.
Yeah, and the entry we're looking at today, it was actually published on March 22, 2026.
Wow, so literally just yesterday.
Just yesterday. It makes this incredibly fresh. I mean, the post is titled Notes on Gardening, Part 8843.
Wait, part 843?
Yes, you heard that correctly. Part 843, The Season of Flame of the Woods, or, Ixora, coccinea.
That number is just staggering.
Yeah.
But I promise you, by the end of this deep dive, you're going to have this really profound aha moment.
Oh, for sure.
It's going to directly connect the natural world to the way we organize our own lives and our learning processes. So let's start with the actual observation that sparked this whole thing.
Right, so the author, he signs his post as saying he's out running errands.
Yeah, right in the middle of what he calls the March heat wave.
Exactly. And during this festive season, he notices something really striking about that plant you mentioned, the flame of the woods.
Which, just for context, the scientific name is Ixora coccinea, right?
It's this really dense, multi-branched evergreen shrub.
The ones with those super bright, vibrant clusters of tiny tubular flowers.
That's the one. It's a total staple in tropical landscaping.
Right. So Aang notices this plant is just blooming profusely everywhere. But he's not looking at some pristine botanical garden.
No.
He specifically points out he's seeing these massive splashes of color in the landscaping at local petrol stations.
I love that detail so much.
Me too.
Yeah?
It's such a grounded, mundane observation. You're sweating through a heat wave, pumping gas.
You just look over and notice this biological phenomena.
Exactly. But what he uncovers about why this is happening completely flips the script on how we usually think about spring blooms.
It really does.
Because this explosion of flowers during a heat wave, it's not the plant thriving because it loves the hot weather.
Right. It's actually a desperate reaction to stress.
Yeah.
The post notes that moderate dry stress actually forces the plant to radically alter its behavior.
Meaning what exactly? Like, what does it do normally?
Well, under normal, comfortable conditions, an Ixora coccinea will happily just churn out standard green leaves.
Right, to maximize solar collection and just grow.
Yeah, exactly. But a drought threatens its very survival. So the biological imperative completely shifts.
It goes from, like, sustained long-term growth to immediate reproduction.
Yes. The plant needs to produce seeds before it perishes.
I was trying to picture the mechanism here, and it honestly makes me think of a struggling startup company.
Oh, that's an interesting analogy. How so?
Well, imagine a tech startup facing a severe financial drought. Their funding is just totally drying up.
Okay, right.
To survive, the CEO immediately freezes all new hiring. They stop buying office supplies. That's the plant halting its leaf production, right?
Right. Conserving energy.
Exactly. The company takes every last cent of its remaining capital and pours it entirely into developing one make-or-break flagship product to save the business.
And for the plant, that flagship product is the flower bud.
Exactly. It builds this army of buds and just holds them in reserve.
That captures the biological gamble perfectly, actually, because the plant is essentially holding its breath. It has expended massive amounts of energy creating these dormant buds, but opening them requires resources it just doesn't have yet.
It needs water.
Right. And then comes the trigger.
The rain.
Yes. Aang notes that the region suddenly gets these intermittent tropical rains.
So after the dry stress has forced the creation of all those waiting buds,
The sudden sharp influx of water, or, to use your startup analogy, a sudden injection of venture capital,
yes,
it acts as a system-wide biological signal.
the plant realizes it finally has the resources to launch the product. It tells all those waiting buds to open simultaneously, and boom,
A massive synchronized explosion of color all along the roadsides.
It completely changes how you look at a sudden bloom, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Like the next time you, our listener, are driving around and you see a massive explosion of flowers right after a long dry spell, you'll know it's not just a happy accident.
No, it is a highly calculated, synchronized response to stress and relief.
Nature is just ruthlessly efficient.
It really is. The plant endures the hardship, prepares meticulously for the future, and then capitalizes instantly the moment resources become available.
And the speed of that bloom is breathtaking. It happens overnight.
It does. And this is where it gets really interesting, that explosive speed completely vanishes when we look at the next phase of the plant's life.
Right, the propagation part.
Yeah, Engi transitions in his post from talking about this rapid bloom to the process of actually propagating the plant by seeds.
And it is not fast.
Not at all.
Hmm.
He notes that you have to wait 2 to 4 months just for the flowers to fall and the fruit to mature.
2 to 4 months.
Yeah, he casually mentions that it will likely be around June or July before they can even harvest the seeds.
See, the contrast there is stark. The spectacle of the bloom happens in a matter of days.
But the actual quiet work of reproduction is this excruciatingly slow grind.
I have to admit my own modern impatience here.
Yeah.
Waiting a third of the year just to harvest a seed. I mean, not even to grow the new plant, just to get the seed. It feels agonizing.
It is a long time.
Especially for Aang. Like, think about who we're talking about here. This is a guy who describes himself as a software plumber.
Right.
In software development, you write a block of code, you hit compile, and you know in a matter of milliseconds if your logic works.
Exactly.
How does a fast-moving, systematic tech thinker interface with a biological process that operates on a timeline of seasons?
We've just identified the core friction that makes this entire blog exist in the first place.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The timeline of a tropical shrub is totally alien to the timeline of a computer processor. You cannot bridge that gap with human memory alone.
That makes sense.
You can't hold the specific soil conditions, the watering schedules, and the weather patterns of a random Tuesday in March in your working memory until June.
I mean, I can barely remember what I had for lunch yesterday.
Precisely. So the only way a programmer can interface with nature's slow biological clock is through meticulous, rigorous documentation.
Aww. So you log the start of the process during the March heat wave.
Right, so that when July rolls around, you have a precise, searchable record of your initial hypothesis.
The slow timeline of the plant basically necessitates the disciplined documentation of the gardener.
Exactly.
And when you realize that tracking a 4-month biological cycle requires a robust system, you start to look at the rest of Aang's website really differently.
Oh, for sure. Zooming out from this single post, remember, this is part 843 of the gardening notes. You discover the sheer scale of his documentation.
It's massive. Aang's About section states the blog is the, quote, journal of an old software plumber, night-long tinkering with free Libra and open-source software.
Which is commonly abbreviated as FLOSS.
FLOSS, right.
And the FLOSS movement is deeply rooted in the idea that information should be transparent, freely accessible, and constantly improved upon by a community.
Yeah, hackers and programmers in this space, they don't keep their code a secret.
No, they publish it openly so others can find bugs and suggest improvements.
And Aang basically takes that digital philosophy and applies it to his physical reality.
He really does.
Like, the structure of this blog doesn't look like a standard personal diary at all. It looks like a giant open-source code repository of a human life.
That is the perfect way to describe it. He treats every single hobby, interest, and daily challenge as a different software project branch.
And the volume of output is dizzying.
It is.
Looking at the sidebar archives provided in the source material, just in March 2026 alone, and keep in mind, the source is dated March 22nd, so the month isn't even finished.
Right.
He published 60 known posts.
59 posts in 22 days. That is more than 3 published entries every single day.
Every single day. And this isn't just some passing quarantine hobby either.
Not at all.
In 2025, he published 730 posts. In 2024, 732 posts. He's been doing this consistently since 2011, scaling up his output year after year.
It's incredible. But it's the categorization of those posts that truly reveals the programmer's mind at work.
Yeah, how so?
Well, he doesn't just write a meandering, thoughts for the day kind of entry.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a note, and everything is serialized with a version number. Just in the brief March 2026 snippet we see notes on Haskell programming up to part 89. We see notes on fish keeping up to part 215.
I have to read some of these titles because the cross-pollination of interests is just incredible.
Go for it.
Okay, we've got notes on dieting, part 116. Is eating fish a better option? We've got notes on photography, part 233. Why I'm sticking to prime lenses. Notes on exercises, part 17. Healing in a rubber well, it cuts off there. But he has sections for networking, home improvement, and highly specific data sets like beta spawn logs.
And Miska Fish's spawn logs.
Right.
He is applying a strict debugging mindset to the physical world.
A debugging mindset. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, when a programmer encounters a bug in their code, they don't just throw their hands up and quit.
Right. They isolate the variable.
Exactly. They isolate it, they deploy a patch, and they log the result to see if the system improves. Aang does the exact same thing in his garden.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Look at the gardening title from earlier in March. Notes on gardening, part 826. Leggy seedlings again.
Oh, man. Anyone who has ever tried to start a garden indoors knows the heartbreak of leggy seedlings.
It's the worst.
You plant your seeds, they sprout, and instead of growing strong and bushy, they just shoot straight up, looking skinny and pale and weak as they desperately stretch toward whatever tiny light source they can find.
Yeah. And usually you just sigh and throw them out.
Exactly.
But for Aang, a leggy seedling is just a bug in the biological software.
That's such a cool way to look at it.
Right. He documents the error in part 826. He employs the scientific method to fix it. He isolates the variables. Is the issue the intensity of the light, the distance of the light source, or perhaps the nutrient density in the soil?
And then he deploys a patch.
Exactly. Maybe moving the seed tray 2 inches closer to the LED lamp, or adjusting his watering schedule. And crucially, he compiles the results in his public log.
So he does this across the board. Like there's part 842 on propagating Brazilian spinach, part 840, why common mustard. He runs trials, he observes the outputs, and he logs the data. It connects perfectly back to the Flame of the Woods post we started with.
It really does.
He reads that dry stress causes the buds, he observes the real-world output at the petrol station, and he logs it as part 843. Noting that the seed harvest will be in June is essentially him setting a calendar reminder for a future system check.
Exactly. It allows him to iterate on his own life. If the Brazilian spinach propagation fails in part 842, he has a written record of exactly what soil and water variables he used.
So he can adjust the code for part 844.
Yes.
Okay, but wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Okay, lay it on me.
If he's writing 3 meticulous, serialized logs a day about his fish, his diet, his exercise, his courting, and his gardening, is he actually leaving himself any time to just experience his life?
That is a very fair question.
Right. It feels like cataloging your existence to this degree could leave you completely exhausted and detached from the joy of the hobbies themselves.
It's a very natural reaction to seeing this level of documentation. But from the perspective of a floss advocate, the documentation isn't a detachment from the experience at all.
It's not.
No, it is the highest form of engagement with it.
How so?
Well, you aren't just passively letting life happen to you. You are actively participating in the mechanics of your own existence.
Actively participating in the mechanics. Okay, that makes sense. But it leads me to wonder who the intended audience is for all this effort.
Right.
Because he includes standard disclaimers on the site stating the opinions are his own, the content is for informational purposes only, and he accepts no liability. He also lists ways to sponsor him on platforms like GitHub, Spotify, and YouTube. So is he writing this vast database for us, the public, or is he simply externalizing his own memory? Is this a public diary or an educational resource?
I think it serves a dual purpose, and it's heavily influenced by the concept of learning out loud.
Learning out loud. I've heard that phrase in tech circles before.
Yeah, in the open source software community, which Aang clearly champions, given his visible support for digital rights groups like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Free Software Foundation, and the Tor Project. The ethos is that information should belong to the commons.
Right. It should be shared.
Exactly. By documenting his micro-learnings publicly, he first builds an incredibly robust external memory drive for himself.
A chronological database of his own personal evolution. We actually see in his tags that he maintains a Now page and a This Week in Review, or TWIR.
Yes, he is constantly synthesizing his own data to see the big picture of his life.
That's the personal side. What's the public side?
The second purpose is perhaps the most profound. By making his logs public, he's contributing to the global repository of human knowledge, no matter how incredibly niche the topic might be.
So someone else on the other side of the world is trying to figure out why their Brazilian spinach isn't taking root.
Or why their Haskell code is throwing an infinite loop error.
Right. A search engine might lead them directly to Ang's Part 842 or Part 89. His personal debugging becomes a public utility.
Exactly.
Thinking about it that way highlights such a stark contrast to how we usually interact with the internet today.
Oh, completely.
Because the modern web is largely ephemeral. We are all trapped in these algorithm-driven feeds. You doom scroll through a social media app, you consume 100 disconnected, bite-sized videos.
And you forget every single one of them an hour later.
Exactly. The platform owns the data, and the content just disappears into the void.
But Ang is actively defying that algorithm.
He really is. He hosts his own journal. He is building a permanent, searchable, version-controlled archive of genuine compounding knowledge, day by day, part by part, from part 1 all the way to part 843.
And the permanence of his approach is a direct challenge to the fleeting nature of modern digital consumption. It asks us to consider the value of our own experiences.
Yeah.
Think about your own life, your own career, or the hobbies you dabble in on the weekends. How much hard-earned knowledge, how many tiny, brilliant aha moments do you lose every single year simply because you trust your flawed human memory to hold on to them?
I lose them constantly. If I think about the obscure plumbing fix I managed to figure out under my kitchen sink last year,
Right.
or like a complex recipe I tweaked perfectly one evening and then completely forgot by the next month, I always have to start from scratch. It's incredibly inefficient.
We all do it. There is immense, untapped power in keeping your own personal logs. You certainly don't have to publish them to the world at a rate of 3 a day like Ang does.
No, definitely not.
But the simple act of maintaining your own spawn logs, your own Part 843 of whatever you are passionate about, it transforms a fleeting temporary thought into permanent, actionable knowledge.
You stop losing ground.
Exactly. You stop starting from zero every time you engage with your interests.
Treating your own life with the respect and rigor of a meticulous programmer. I really love that takeaway. This has been quite a journey today.
It really has.
We started standing at a local petrol station during a March heat wave, looking at a flame-of-the-woods plant that was severely stressed out by a drought. We unpacked the biological mechanism, learning that nature uses dry stress to force the plant to halt leaf production and prepare for an explosive future bloom, just waiting for the trigger of a sudden rain.
And from that botanical starting point, we explored the massive timeline mismatch between the rapid bloom of a flower and the agonizingly slow 4-month process of harvesting its seeds.
Which we saw demands patience and incredibly precise observation.
Right.
Which led us straight into the open-source mind of Ang, our software plumber. A guy who applies the rigorous, methodical debugging mindset of writing software to every tangible aspect of his physical life.
From fish keeping and prime lenses to the propagation of Brazilian spinach.
Yeah. He demonstrates the profound compounding value of documenting our microlearnings and compiling a searchable database of our own existence.
His journal really stands as a monument to the power of structured, relentless curiosity. It proves that the mundane details of our lives, when observed closely and documented faithfully, contain a wealth of insight.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. It has been a truly fascinating look at the intersection of botanical science, coding philosophies, and the lost art of meticulous documentation.
But before you go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on the biological mechanism of the Ixora coccinea we discussed at the very beginning.
Oh, please do.
We established that for the flame of the woods, a period of moderate dry stress followed by a sudden shower is nature's exact, necessary formula for a spectacular bloom.
Right.
Perhaps we can take a cue from that tropical shrub. When you experience your own creative, intellectual, or emotional dry spells, those frustrating periods where your ideas are stalled, your projects aren't growing, and nothing seems to be working.
Yeah, we all have those.
Maybe we shouldn't view them as failures or wasted time. Maybe, just like the plant under a hot sun, those dry spells are actually the quiet, vital accumulation of potential. You are secretly building 1,000 invisible buds, doing the hard work beneath the surface, just waiting for that one right drop of inspiration to finally blossom.
Wow, what a beautiful way to reframe our own droughts. Until next time, keep exploring, keep documenting your own aha moments, and take care.